Good morning and welcome to the Olive Branch. We are so glad that you are joining us for our final week of Good News Give Back. We hope over the past couple of weeks you've been encouraged and inspired as we've celebrated what God has been and is doing in and through our church. Just like the original disciples, we are to duplicate Jesus. We are to be his hands and feet in this world. He wants us to join him in his movement of generosity, to love, to serve, and to give to others generously. Today, let's get excited as we talk about and challenge one another what it means to be generous with our treasures, our financial resources. But first, let's center our hearts and sing together.
I'm calling on the God of Jacob, whose love endures through generations. I know that you will keep your covenant. I'm calling on the God of Moses, the one who opened up the ocean. I need you now to do the same thing for me. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm calling on the God of Mary, who favor rests upon the lowly. I know with you all things are possible. I'm calling on the God of David, who made a shepherd more courageous. I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giant. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, your faithfulness. You heard your children then, you hear your children now. You are the same God, you are the same God. You answered prayers back then, and you will answer now. You are the same God, you are the same God. You were providing then, you are providing now. You are the same God, you are the same God. You move in power then, God move in power now. freed the captives then. You're freeing hearts right now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You touched the leper then. I feel your touch right now. You are the same God. You are the same God.
How's everybody? I'll start over again. How's everybody doing? Great. That's good. God, that one person is doing great. That's really good. Isn't it nice to be back in short sleeve season? Man, oh man, it's really good. I'm sure you're probably wondering what the heck this is, right? Anybody know? Let me tell you where I got it. Back in the 50s, I think it was 1956. There were 5 missionaries that went down to Ecuador to try and reach a tribe down there that by the name of the Waorani tribe. And so they did a lot of different work, trying to get familiar with them and, dropping off good things and so on. And finally were able to land a plane on a beach right near where they lived. Now, these people had never been out of the jungle before. And so they reached out to them. World was shocked, and actually it was written up in Life magazine when they all got murdered. They're not even sure why, but seemed like they had a good relationship with them. And then the people came out and murdered them, speared them to death. And guy who was flying the plane, his name was Nate Saint. You may remember the story. And I had a chance to meet his son, Steve Saint, when I was down in Ecuador. And actually got this. This is a blowgun. This is what they use. So they've got these little arrows in here, and they have poison on them. These ones don't. I was going to shoot some out there, but they don't have poison on them. So, anyways, yeah, you got that. So what's interesting about this? You may have seen the movie a number of years ago called End of the Spear, and this is a story about these people that went in there to reach this group of people. Steve went back to this Waorani tribe to work with them, even though they'd killed his dad. He's had a great ministry with them. Jim Elliot, one of the guys that was part of this team, he's well known for a saying, and he was a tremendous leader. All these guys were only in their 20s when all this happened. And he said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep." In this case, it was his life, to gain what he cannot lose. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. This is pretty much the phrase that keeps us from what we want most in life. Most of us, when we die, we want to be known as a person who made a difference in other people's lives, as somebody who was able to give, as somebody who was able to hold relationships together, who was able to hold a marriage together, and so on. These words are what keep us from being what we are supposed to be and what God has called us to be. And you've probably thought them. What about me? What about me? Go into a marriage, and if this is your favorite phrase, what about me? What about me? What about me? What about me? It'll kill your relationship. You go into a job, and this is your key phrase, well, what about me? What about me? What about me? It'll kill your job. And if you choose to follow Jesus, and this becomes your favorite phrase, what about me? What about me? This will kill off what God wants to do through your life. We are made to give. That's how we were created. I have a story, and I was in my office one day at another church, And so there's this knock at the door. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm writing a message on compassion or generosity or something like that. And there's this knock at the door, and I go out there. And there's a woman and two of her daughters, and she said, we came for the free store. And I said, well, the free store isn't until next week. Why don't you come back then? So, well, we need to get a blanket, and some help and stuff. So, but I said, well, if you come back next week, we'll help you. I'm ashamed of that. So I got back to my office, and I thought, well, I could help them. I could do something. So by the time I got back down to the door, they were gone. And that happens to us in life. And believe me, I not only shame myself, I get shamed by others as well. So I got my reward for that. But there is something in us that feels regret when we could have done something and we didn't do it. If you ever watch some of the stuff, I watch Mayday. So these people who survive a plane crash, many times or survive some other disaster. Many times they say, that thing crashed and I got out of there as fast as I could. I could hear people crying in the background. I could hear people yelling, and that haunts me at night. I wish I would have done something. Even people who, realize that they could have done something for somebody that was in need or whatever, there's this sense of regret. You know why we feel that? It's because we were made in the image of God. We were not made to be selfish. We were not made to cling to everything that we have or live by this philosophy. What about me? Now, as you know, one of the controlling metaphors, I'm going to be talking about that next week when we start a new series. The controlling metaphor of this story as we've gone along has been winter, spring, summer, and fall. The controlling metaphor story, as you're well aware of, are these 4 lepers. And so they find themselves in a scene of desperation. And as you know, desperate people do desperate things. So they're part of this city, Samaria, which is in the northern part of Israel. And the city was basically being sieged. And what that means is an army will surround a city, and they will starve the people out. See, they had walls up, and the walls kept them in, but it also kept everything else out. So this Syrian army, Aramean army, they're just kind of waiting it out. They've got a camp probably about, a couple kilometers away, and they've got regular, caravans coming in and filling up the camp with food and clothes and everything else, and they're just kind of sitting over there eating. They have to go and do their duty by the camp, and so on. So these people are starving. Desperate people do desperate things. And if you read the story, it's horrible. It has to be one of the most horrible stories in the Bible. Because you've got mothers eating their children, if you can imagine that. The food that they talk about there is, it says a cup of dove poop was costing, about, a pound of silver. And then if you wanted to buy a donkey's head and really, live it up, it'd be about the price of a house in that culture. Horrible, horrible stuff. People were dying. So these lepers, they're outside the city, and you probably remember some of the story that's been told. And they're thinking to themselves, okay, we've got 3 choices. We can go inside the city, and we can starve with everybody there, but that's not possible because we're lepers, so we're not allowed to go in there. And then we'll die. Or we can stay out here by the gate, and we can stay out here and starve to death out here by the gate. Or, hey, we're going to die anyways. As you know, leprosy is a life sentence. And he said, let's go over to the Aramean camp and see if maybe they'll, they're going to do one thing. They're going to put us out of our misery. Or they'll give us something to eat. So they go over, and they're shocked. Because it's spooky, it's quiet. And they're over there, and they begin to kind of sneak into the camp and look through the tents and so on. And they realize nobody's there. And so they go, hey, it's bonanza, let's go get it for ourselves. And so they're eating the food, they're drinking the wine, and they're hauling the stuff out and storing it for themselves. And then they come to this realization. Finally, they said to each other, this is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. And if we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace. So they're stuck in between, okay? So they've got this, on this one side, they've got this whole city of starving people who are going to die. And on the other side, they've got this empty camp with all this stuff stacked up over there. Now, this is what we ask when we come upon something like this. Well, what about me? I mean, we got thrown out of our families. People are throwing their garbage over the walls. That's where we're eating. Nobody wants to be around us. We're not even allowed to be with people we love. What about me? And we find ourselves in that position. And that's where we have to decide, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Am I going to keep it all for myself, or am I going to help somebody else? And that's where this really begins to make sense. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep. Anybody have a plan, and you're going to keep all your stuff, your iPhone and your new car, your SUV, and everything like that, and you're going to find a way to medevac it up to heaven with you, which is where we all hope to go, right? Not going to happen. So that's the predicament, okay? So the good news is, let's take what's here at the Aramean camp to Samaria. Now, here's this tough thing, We live in a place of plenty. Is there anybody who doesn't know that? Some of you moved from other countries because you wanted to be here, because it's a place of plenty. It's a place where you can, make a lot of money, and you may not, but, we're doing pretty good, right? Like, it's not a matter of whether or not we're going to have enough to eat, or whether we're going to have clothes to wear, or usually even have a place to live. I mean, we're going to do okay. So what we tend to do when we look at what we have is we look at somebody who has more than I do, okay? Well, Jeff Bezos, that guy's a billionaire. Like, he had to give a little bit of his money away. Or Elon Musk. Have you seen the cars that he's producing? He's into this revolution, he got all this stuff, and Steve Jobs, man, he made a fortune off of the iPhone and everything. Like, you can look at somebody else, and you can find somebody who has a lot more than you, instead of looking at the person who has way, 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 way less than you. That's the trick that we play on ourselves. What about me? Why should I have to give? Now, we know how to give. Here in Canada, we know how to give. You see a sad commercial about, cats that are in misery, and you throw a few shekels at them. I don't, but you may, Or dogs that are shivering, or somebody shows enough pictures, of kids with sad eyes who are crying and flies buzzing around them, we think, I could do something. So we'll throw a few shekels at that. We give at work, we give at home. But when it gets right down to actually becoming a generous person, that's where we stall out. The other imagery that we use is the imagery of, the winter, spring, summer, and fall. So winter is like everything's frozen up. Everything's frozen up. Like, you plant stuff and the seed's just going to bounce off the ground. So everything's frozen. Spring comes, and spring is a wet season. Sometimes we begin to cry. Sometimes, it's a wet season, and the dirt becomes manageable so that we can begin to do something with it, But what happens is, if we ask this question, what about me? That's where it stops. And we freeze back up again. And what freezes us over is fear. What about me? What if I don't have enough? What if I give and now I'm poverty-stricken and my kids are walking around, wearing barrels or, clothes from the Salvation Army or something? What about me? What about my family? What about my future? What about my retirement? And that's the question that we ask. Now, you could do a Jeff Bezos thing. He apparently says that when he dies, that most of what he has is going to go, to help people who are poor. Really? Like, when I'm done using everything I want for myself, which will be, 50 years from now, then, we'll let it trickle out into the places where people have already starved to death or done desperate things, right? And that's not the model you want to follow. Now, Jesus talked about this a lot. And this is where we just, like, whenever he talked about money, you know what he talked about? His thing wasn't, don't save, let's just save it up for yourself because you're going to need it someday when you get old and you can't work. You better bury it. You better make sure that you keep it. If you read what he says, his advice is always, you better send it ahead. Remember his story about the rich farmer? I had a friend in college by the name of Rich Farmer, but that wasn't him, okay? This guy was a wealthy agriculturalist, And you know what his defining characteristic was? He had really good dirt. Did he make the dirt? Nope, he didn't make the dirt. And he probably didn't even buy the dirt. It was probably, passed on to him. So you remember, this conversation. This comes up specifically in a whole conversation about greed. And Jesus says, man, you better avoid greed. Greed is this, okay, defined. If it comes to me, it belongs to me, I'm going to put it in my bank account, and nobody else is going to get it. That's what greed is. Because we tend to think of greed as people, have lots of money and they sit down in their basement and count it. It's all mine, That's not what it is. Most of us can identify with greed. And so this guy, when he does his little speech about what he's got, and he's been figuring this out. What am I going to do? Oh, no, I've got all this extra stuff. So he's got people starving all around him. What does he come up with? I'm going to build bigger barns. I'm going to stockpile it all. Listen to what he says. It's all about me. And then I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, who talks to themselves, my friend, you have stored enough for years to come, but take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, anybody remember what God said to him? What the angel traced on his tombstone that night? You're a fool. You fool. You will die this very night, and then who will get everything that you worked for? Now, that's an interesting statement, isn't it? Now, let me tell you how this works, okay? You and I are going to die someday. I'm going to die someday. I know that. Sooner than I think, I'm sure. But the way this works is that when you die, God scrapes it all off of you. And if you've done fairly well, he'll need a bigger scraper. Okay? And if you've done even better than that, he'll need a bigger scraper to get it all off of you, okay? And if you've done really, really well, and there are bigger scrapers than this. I have one at home, but he just needs a bigger scraper because we leave it all here. That's the point. We have one chance to make a difference in other people's lives, and you can stockpile it for yourself, and then God will send the angel the night you die to trace on your tombstone, you fool. You fool. And the saying is, and I'm not going to turn this back over again, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. It doesn't just apply to he's either. Men, it applies to women as well. So, what God wants to do in us, and I'm telling you, it will always take faith to do this. It will always take faith to do this. To see what you have through the eyes of God and see what he wants to do in the world. You can keep it all for yourself. You sure can do that. The rich farmer did that. Lots of people do that. And they just get a big monument with their name carved on it, And so people come by 100 years later. I wonder who that was. Well, it was a fool. What's interesting in this story, and I think interesting with us as well, is the whole story really is about fear. With Samaria, they built these walls really, really high and really big and strong. Why? Well, because they were afraid of armies like the Syrian army, like the Aramean army, If we don't build our walls high, then they're going to come and get it. And that wall, remember what happened down in St. Louis, or not, I'm sorry about that. Anyways, Louisiana, okay? Remember the flood? Remember the levees, what happened? It didn't keep the water out. It just kind of drowned them. It was kind of like a bathtub, and that's what big walls do to you, okay, sometimes. So there's that fear. You know how these Aramean troops got scared out of there? He didn't have to send an army. He just sent sound effects. So he's the he's the master at this. So he sent the sound of a marching army and horses and everything coming, and these guys took off. So God used fear to get them out of their place and give their food to somebody else. And then God also used fear when it came to the lepers, because they're thinking to themselves, this time it was fear of God. What if we keep all this for ourselves and our whole city starves to death? Because we can either be heels or we can be heroes. They're caught between the feast and the famine. And I'm telling you, friends, that's where we find ourselves. It's us too. You know as well as I know that the need in this world is huge, especially for Jesus. We see all kinds of chaos going on. And we have a choice. And our fear will either be the fear of God, the fear of being, by the way, are we owners or managers? Anybody know? What are we? Are we owners? No, we're managers. And God sends us what we need for ourselves. He doesn't scrimp, but we're managers. And if you're a manager, if I sent all my money to the guy who manages my money and I found out that, he bought a vacation place down in Florida, I'd be a little upset, Because the point of managing is that you do what the owner wants you to do. That's just the way it works. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about how this works, and I'm not sure where I am in all my charts, okay? So greed, if it comes to me, it belongs to me. We get in this cycle of crazy in our lives, and I think you know this, okay? So we worry about how we're going to, pay our bills, how we're going to get the car we want, how we're going to get the house we want. So we worry about that. But we're worrying about how we're going to consume. And so then we make money, and then we consume it. Did you know that the average person in Canada actually spends more than they make any given year? Did you know that? Okay. Well, it's something you know. Oh, okay. So, and then what happens over time is if we spend more than we make, it's an amazing thing. This is brilliant. I hope you understand this. We go into debt. Everybody understands, right? And then what happens is then we end up with no margin in our lives. Anybody ever been in a place where you don't have any margin? Like the bills are coming in, and you're thinking, okay, I've just done my monthly thing, and I've still got stuff coming in. So we come back up here, and we worry about what we're then going to buy in the future, and we just stay in this crazy cycle. And what we say in the middle of it is, I can't give. That's what we tell ourselves. And it's not true. You think about this. Homes in this area are selling for about $1.1 million. And I know some of you are getting squeezed to death over that. But we don't just stop there. SUVs, they go from like $40,000 up to, $150,000, something like that. So, and then we have cell phones. Nobody has ever said, you know what, I can't afford to keep this thing. I just got to get rid of it. I've got to give up my cell phone. We don't say that. Vacations, we still take vacations. We still get close, because there's always going to be something that we will see, and we think, I'd like that. So Lori and I went to this thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gary Hill auctions. So this is stuff that other people have let go of in their lives. And you know what was surprising? We went up and visited the auction house. And doggone it, there were some things there. We didn't need them before we went. But the thought is, I could use that, right? And that's just the way it works. That's part of what drives us in the world we live in, is that they try to create a need that we really don't have, and then we bite. So this is something, I think, honestly, that it really boils down to this. There might be some people who can't give. But remember Jesus, he kind of obliterated this when this poor widow came in, and he's watching the offering boxes, and these people who have a lot of money, they're dropping in ka-ching, ka-ching, Ka-ching! This money's coming in. And then this woman comes by. She's a poor widow, and she throws out this, little copper pen. I don't know if you've ever seen these things, but they're like tin foil, it's just, ching. And Jesus said she just gave more than all these other people making all this noise with their money, because she gave, and she has all kinds of needs in her life. They just threw leftovers. They're going to have plenty left. So we can give, and we can choose to be generous. And that's the question. The question is, what will you choose to do? Because we can choose it. Now, let me just mention a couple things here about this. Generosity isn't just, because our thought is spontaneous, Oh, they gave me to eat, and I felt really, really bad, so I threw in a few shekels. That's not generosity. It means that it's a priority in your life. It doesn't mean that, you throw, half your salary into there, but it's like a priority. I am going to give. Because when I give, it goes into other people's lives. It makes a difference. It's an act of love for people. Percentage. How many of you would say that percentage of your money, let's say, goes to your cell phone every week? How many of you would say percentage of it, right? Now, what do they say if you call them up and say, you know what? Like, I spent everything on coffee this week, and I just can't pay it, Well, you do that enough times, and they say, we're going to reel your cell phone back in, or we're going to make it so that you can't use it. Because we do that. We give a percentage to what our rent. We give a percentage to the electric company. We give a percentage everywhere else. And this is just like, this is the way it's going to happen. The Bible, in the Old Testament, it suggests 10%. That may not be where you start. Maybe you start with 0.5% or 0.25% or whatever. But that's where you start, and it becomes regular. It becomes a part of your life. It's a value. It's a value in your life. And if it just comes up sporadically, well, it's obviously not a value. You pay for everything else. So just be honest about it. Not a value. I don't want to do it. I care about me. I'm going to make sure that I get taken care of. And if there's anything left, good for God. And then progressive. It's like, I want to grow as this person because that's who God wants you to be. And I'm telling you that this is part of your growth. This is part of who you will become. And I'm telling you, it will make a difference for all of eternity. It really will. Now, okay, I lost my way here, okay. Remember the guy came to Jesus and he had all this money and so on. He was rich, he was young, he was, had everything he wanted, And it says that Jesus looked at him and loved him. He felt genuine love for him. There's still one thing you haven't done, he told him. So this guy's thinking, well, does he want me not to lust? Does he want me to, to not steal anymore? Because I've done that, man. Like you look up, 10 commandments and, in the who's who, and you'll see my picture there because I'm keeping all these commandments. And Jesus says, go sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And what he's dealing with in this guy is this self-centered part of it. I'm going to take care of number one. He's not telling everybody in the whole world, go sell everything that you have, empty out your house and give it to the poor. It's not what he's saying. He's putting his finger on what was the God in this guy's life. He said, you've got the last 5 down pretty well. What about the first one? Where God is the priority in your life. Now, wise investors are people who understand this whole concept of planting, okay? And that's the other metaphor I want to use here. So the way this works is when winter stops, and we're glad, how many of you are glad that winter has stopped? Okay, you got some green, trees in your backyard, maybe your front yard or whatever, and they got a little bit of green on them. It's just good news all around. So the spring comes, the soil softens up, and then we get near the beginning of summer, we plant the seed, right? Now here's the question. This is wheat seed, by the way. My granddaughters were playing with it in my office, and it was all over the place, but it's okay, So what if a person says, you know what? That's a lot of seed to plant. It's just like throwing it in the dirt. You're planting it, but it really, it's just dirt. We're throwing it in the dirt. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind it up and make something that's tangible. I'm just going to make bread with it all. Now, you may be really fat at the end of, after you've ground up all your grain. Is it a smart farmer who, eats all of his grain instead of planting it? No, that's a dumb farmer. Because you see, the whole thing of planting is a fascinating parable. Jesus said this. He says, unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground, unless it gets into the ground, he said it's going to be put on a shelf someplace and it's just going to wither up. We have a chance to plant. Now, I want to show you kind of I did this, okay? Like I did this on my own cell phone, with my own little computer there and stuff like this, my own calculator. So if you plant one grain of wheat, one little of these little pieces of wheat here, by the end of your year, it's going to grow up into this stalk. You're going to have 80 kernels of wheat on it. It's like not enough quite to make up, bread, is it? So year 2, if you plant, then you get 6,400 grains of wheat. Or if you eat it, you get nothing. Year 3, you get 512,000 kernels of wheat. Or if you eat it, you get 0. Year 4, my word, 41 million kernels of wheat, 41 bushels. Or if you eat it, you get 0. Year 5, you're talking 3,280 bushels of wheat, or if you eat it, you get nothing. Year 6, you can see it, right? You understand how this works. And here's the deal. If you invest in people, those people then invest in other people, and those people then invest in other people, and those people invest in other people. And that's why Jesus says, man, you better send it ahead, because that's how it gets sent ahead. If you don't, if you keep it here, if you eat it, well, first of all, you're going to be really fat. They won't be able to find a coffin big enough for you. But it's all going to get scraped off of you. We have the chance in this life to send it ahead. And we send it ahead in the lives of people. And their hearts are changed. And they give. And then they invest it in other people, and their hearts are changed. And they give. And I'm telling you, it just grows exponentially. So, Year 7, if you keep doing this, you end up with 420,000 tons of flour. That's a lot that'd make you really fat if you eat all the flour, right? And that's the thing. That's the thing. You send it ahead. See, think about it. Why did Jesus show up here? He showed up here to save people, to save you and me. Not to give us all some excellent investment plan so that we could all be rich, until we die. He invested in us, and the call is that we invest in other people. I tell you, that's exactly why the devil will do everything he can to keep you from giving. Because if he can keep you from giving, if he can make you think about yourself 24/7 and so on, then he's won. That's why he tries to discourage us. And that's the decision that we all have to make. What's he going to do? I think I got one more picture here. Let me see. Oh, yeah. How does money get past the final barrier? Well, it doesn't unless we invest in people. Think about it like this. You're going to retire someday. And if you just keep spending all your money on buying, house, buying SUVs, buying everything, clothes, everything else. And you think, I'm just going to invest in that because that's what counts now, that's what's real to me. Then you're going to end up, when you retire and you won't have it. Every person, every investment person would tell you, you need to think ahead. You need to think ahead. And it's the same with you and me when it comes to giving. Giving, when you give, you're thinking way, way, way ahead. And I'm telling you, you will be glad that you did. This is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity is going to come. We're going to miss the opportunity. So God speaks to all of us. And the question he asks is, so will you give? Will you become a generous person? Will you think about giving in terms of the priority? Will you make it a priority? He who gives what he cannot keep is no fool to gain what he cannot lose. And that's where we are. What's it going to be for you? And maybe the bigger question is, it's not like, well, you know what? I'm going to carefully think about this, and maybe 2 or 3 years from now, I think I might do it. You put it off, and you'll keep putting it off. I guarantee you will. Do it now. Start small. Think about, okay, I am not the owner of what I have. I am not the owner. There's another owner. And one day I have to come and I have to give an account to him with what I did, with all I had, some of which he intended to get to other people. That's how you have to think. So why not do it now? Why not start? Let's pray. God, I thank you that you care about us and you give us the opportunity to invest. It's not how we think about it. We tend to think about it not being in our bank account and being somewhere else, and that we're going to come across something that we really, really, really want, and we can't buy it because we gave it away. Help us to think bigger. Help us to think about other people's lives. Help us to understand that what really matters in this life is what we send ahead. It's not enough to just want to be generous. We have to actually do it. So give us the courage when we face the fear of what about me? Amen.
What a good reminder that in order to be generous with our finances, that we need to be intentional and we need to remember who it all belongs to. We can be good stewards of what we've been given, and we can make it a priority to give our first back to God. As a church, when we began 20 years ago, we decided that we wanted to do things differently and really invest in our community. In order to make that happen and for it not to just be a dream, we decided that a percentage of the tithes would go back in meeting the needs around us. Let's take a look at this video as Ken Davis and John Deacon share with us how it all began.
So this is John Deacon, and I know John. I've known John since forever. First time I remember hearing about John was he was the only person in the church who had a small group with the homeless people in downtown Toronto. John was one of the key persons who walked with me through probably the most horrible experience of my life and with our family. And he was one of the founding members of the Olive Branch. He helped us renovate this building, dropped his cell phone in a can of paint upstairs. But the one thing that John did was he made it clear that if we were truly going to be a church that pleased Jesus, then it needed to include Jesus' last message. I was without a place to stay, and you gave me a place to stay. I didn't have anything to eat. You gave me something to eat. I didn't have anything to drink, and you gave me something to drink. I was sick and in prison. You came and visited me. That had to be a part, not just of the scriptures that we read, but it had to be part of the life of this church. Mm-hmm. So, John, you started Branch Out, and you were very clear about this, and it rang through all of those first meetings that we had as we began to dream about what God might want to do.
Yeah. So, Branch Out started as a twofold thing, as a benevolent fund whereby we were collecting money. 10% of every offering would go to assisting the community at large, not just members of the church, but the community at large. But also it would be a commitment the church was making that we were not going to be a church within ourselves. We were going to be a church without walls, I think was the term we used.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Which meant we were saying to the members of the congregation, you're in church, Monday to Friday, you're in church.
Yeah.
It just happens to be your workplace. It happens to be the social agency you're connected to. It happens to be your volunteer work. But we want you to understand that your Christianity is to embrace your connection to the community. And so that was the whole heart of Branch Out. And from that vantage point, it branched out into many things that I don't think you or I ever anticipated. Oh.
It caught fire. Like, I don't think there was ever any need to convince people that we needed to do this. This latched into our heart. This was going to be a new kind of church, and we were not going to be dragged kicking and screaming into helping people. Like, this was going to be a part of our identity of who we were. And there was enthusiasm about it. And it did create some pain. Like, I remember when the whole crash happened at 2008 and 2009, and the treasurer came to the board and said, I think we had to cut Branch Out from 10% down to 5%. And the unanimous thing was, I mean, we didn't blow it out of the water, but the unanimous sense was, no, we're not going to do that. Because it's an act of faith. What we're doing is an act of faith, just like anybody who's tithing. Yeah. And the commitment was, we're going to stay with it. Our belief was that God would have to speak to people, and that was our prayer. God, you're going to have to speak to people to move beyond just throwing leftovers at you, to give so that we can actually fulfill our commitments to people in need.
Branch Out is not to be a new program. It's to basically provide the resource for people who are already out there engaged and just say, what do you need from us that we can help you in what you're doing? I remember we went to the York Center for Abused Children or something like that. I think it's changed its name since. But we said to them, you are doing great work, and probably we know kids that are accessing your services. As a caring community, what can we do to help you in the work that you're doing in the community? You know what they said? They said, could you give us $1,500 and we could take a staff retreat?
Yeah.
Because our staff is burnt out. So that's all we did.
Yeah.
But the connection we got every year, we would figure out how we could help them thereafter. I think that's where we're at, and I know that the church has continued that legacy by helping refugees and immigrants and food banks and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it is the conviction that the church, unless it's meaningfully engaged in the world, and not the world, the affluent world, but the world of human need, boy, that's when Christ really stands out.
It changes the people who give. It changes the people who receive, and it also changes the people who give and engage. And there's a whole reward on the other side that we don't see right now. It's what we've planted that is growing and making a difference, and it goes way beyond anything that we could ever even begin to understand. What we do as a church engages us all. And so I think it's really important for people to feel good about and be able to say, church I'm a part of, man, we're involved all over the place. We are helping people. We are doing what we believe that Christ calls us to do. And that's what people expect. People expect that if you're a church, you got to be doing something for people. And I think that everybody would be able to say with confidence, we're engaged. We're not perfect. We're not doing as much as we can and hope to someday, but we're engaged in the need in our world.
Our heart is reflected by what we invest in. Yeah. And if a church claims to have a heart, it should be reflected in what it invests in. And if it doesn't invest in at least 10% in engaging in the community around it to the same degree Jesus did, then you really have to say, are we really all that we could be in terms of living out our faith? Yeah. We are invested not just in ourselves. We are not interested in becoming a group of 50,000 at the expense of not mattering to the people who live closest to us. We want to be community, and the way that we're going to demonstrate that community is not just by volunteering for whatever it is that you would have us volunteer in, but we're going to invest in you. And right now that number is 10%.
It has been a result of all of us coming together over the past 20 years that we've been able to invest what we have into the people in this church, in our community partners and the work that they do, and also into the individual needs of those in our community. During our first week of Good News Give Back, the call to action was to love others generously. You can still go to the Good News Give Back page and learn about our community partners who are loving others well. As well, daily we can just choose to love others generously. Last week, the call to action was to serve generously. You can still go to the Good News Give Back page and sign up for those one-time service opportunities. You can learn more about Partners in Care ministry and fill out a volunteer interest form. You can learn about our community partners who are serving others well. There are just so many options for you to practice serving others. This week, our call to action is to give generously. We have put together a card to help you reflect on where you're at on your generosity journey and how you could make giving a priority in your life, and working up to giving a percentage of your income, the way that Jesus really desires and God wants us to in our life. And all of this is to help us to progress with our generosity in order to invest in God's kingdom. I would also encourage you, if you have kids or teens in your house, include them in these conversations. What a great time in their lives to begin to learn about what it means to be generous and to make sure their firsts are going to God as well. Also, if some of the decisions that you make in terms of progressing in your giving require some cutbacks, they might have some great ideas of how to do that. And what a great way for them to understand why you might choose not to do something in order to give more to God's mission and his kingdom work. Thank you so much for being part of Good News Give Back the past few weeks. Jesus is on a mission, and he is calling us to join him. And we get to do that by loving, serving, and giving generously. But let's just not make this a one-time event thing, but something that we do in our daily lives throughout the year. We hope you have a fantastic week.